up guys, welcome to Garage 23. This is our 1998 Nissan Skyline, or at least what's left of it. In our last video, we did this irreparable damage to it and we're freaking out. Or at least we were, until one of you guys helped me out. Shout out to R34_Chris with the Z on Instagram. He also has an R34 that he went through this whole process with. And he gave me some ideas as to what to do about the inner fender well. Because the R34 GTR is wider, you need to make up that space in the inner wheel well. And not gonna lie, I was kind of freaking out because it's a really complicated shape and I was having a really tough time trying to figure out what to do about it. Until Chris reached out and he sent me some pictures of what he did on his car, as well as some other videos that he found of other people doing this process. And the idea that we came up with was to use a fender flare. This is a sheet metal fender flare made by Ulterior Motives, and we're gonna try to use it on the inside of the car. So hopefully that works out. So let's get started. All right, so in the last video, you guys saw us chop the quarter panel off, and we left these edges, which the only difference that I've done in between these videos is clean this up. So this edge is nice and smooth, deburred, and I've cleaned off about 1 inch of paint on the edges, so it's ready to mate up with the new panel. But before we do that, we need to cut all the excess off of this panel. So, as you can see, this section, it was meant to actually go under the top roof skin. Basically, to do this properly, you would need to remove the whole roof section, replace this part, and then put the roof back. But ain't nobody got time for that. So this is what basically every single body shop ever does, is just section it at the B and C pillars and weld it together. We need to like try and replicate this exact same cut on this panel, but to even attempt to like get it in the ballpark, we need to cut all this excess stuff off. So we need to try and mark it out and then get our little air saw and chop it off. All right, so we got our panel marked up just to where I know it's gonna clear the cut that we already made over here. And now we need to cut those pieces off. More than anything, I would be super happy not to have these laying around taking up so much space and being so awkward to handle. That's the main thing I'm excited about. All right, now we can go for our first mock-up. So now that we have it more or less fit on there, we can mark out exactly where our cuts are and then make the final cut. All right, so the edge of our cut is right there. So now we need to cut this last section off. And what I'm gonna do is not cut exactly on that line, because if you cut too much, you can't really put it back, and it's gonna be kind of a pain to like fill the gap if it's too large of a gap. So I wanna be able to still have some meat there to grind down so we can like grind exactly the right amount of gap that we need to weld it in. And then do the same thing on this side. All right, so now we're gonna use the grinder and just refine that edge nice and slow, because we don't wanna, like I said, bite off more than we can chew. There's other ways of doing this. Like I've seen body guys just like overlay both panels and then cut through both of them at the same time. That way you're cutting both at the same time and having like that nice seam of the blade, the thickness of the blade making your gap. I think that's too risky for this, so I don't wanna try that. So I'm just gonna do it this way, nice and slow, and not screw it up. All right, so we got it pretty close, and this is why I wanted to go slow, is because you can see we didn't even go up to the line, but we already have a very slight gap in some areas. So that's kind of what we want. We just want a very slight gap, but we want it consistently all the way across. And over here we got a slightly bigger gap, which that's about the limit that you want right there. We just need to take a little bit off the front and back basically. So I'm just gonna mark out with the Sharpie the areas that we still need to grind. And then we'll give it one more try. Okay, so we got our edges cleaned up and we have a nice consistent panel gap now. That's gonna be much easier for welding later. Also along the B-pillar, we also have the whole panel more or less where it's supposed to go now. And we also have the fender flare on the inside. And we need it in there right now just to get an idea of how much we need to cut off the stock fender well. So now we're gonna go take our Sharpie and then mark out on the inside where it's sitting on the factory wheel well. Okay, so now we have a much better idea of where we should cut to situate our fender flare. So we're gonna cut there, and this should sit pretty nicely right about here. So I guess time to start cutting stuff. All right, so we got our whole outline cut out, and I started to go around these sections because these are a little thicker and they should serve better as like reinforcement. We might have to cut more off of this end. I'm not super sure yet, but we have enough cut off that we can do another test fit and see how we're looking. I also cut some more off of this end because this portion kind of collides with the back of the quarter panel, so this will make it easier to fit up. So test fit number 2. All right, so we got the fender flare in place as well as the quarter panel, and the spacing looks pretty good. The empty space at the bottom down here looks like it's gonna be complicated. Might have to do some more cutting there, but overall, looking pretty good. And then on the back side, a bit more complicated. It looks like I can try and like cut more of this along the back and see if I can flex this out, and it looks like it might, maybe if we're lucky, it might meet up with the new quarter panel. Another issue though is at the very bottom, it actually sticks out too much, so the panel doesn't meet up with the frame like it's supposed to. So might be able to just like force it down, but I'm not sure yet. Yeah, that's where we're at. I'm gonna take it off again and then do more cutting and massaging and see where we end up again. Okay, so after wrestling with this for entirely way too long and putting the panel on and off way too many times, we finally have it in a more or less adequate position to seal up against the outer door panel and the inner inner wheel well. What I ended up doing was flattening the whole edge out because these come with the slight bevel. This is a sheet metal fender flare that's meant to like go on the outside of a car, so it has like kind of a flange on the inside edge. I ended up flattening all that out and just cut some recesses for these pillars here, and then hammered the inner wheel well out to meet up with it. And yeah, it just took entirely way too long. It kind of screwed up a little bit and cut this too much, so we're gonna need to weld another piece of this back on here so it can meet up with this piece. This actually lines up pretty well. We just ended up having to bend it out to meet up with the GTR quarter panel. So we're gonna have to fill this in. Might actually be able to do it with this same piece, I'm not sure. I'll give it a shot. And then on the front end, This is kind of a complicated shape that we have to deal with, but like all the planes line up pretty well. So it's just gonna be a matter of like getting some cardboard and drawing this out and welding it up. Yeah, I think we can just start welding it out. We'll start with these pillars here and then work our way out, and then deal with the two complicated sections when we get to them.
Warning, flashing lights.
All right, so fitment is looking pretty good. The main thing I'm concerned about is keeping this edge from pressing too hard up against the outer quarter panel, because we need to be able to put some kind of sealant against this, because I'm not gonna actually weld the outside to the quarter panel, partially because that would be like twice the amount of work, but I also went this way because I want more clearance in the wheel well than the stock wheel wells have. So what I'm doing is like making sure that this outer edge, I'm having to bend it in a little bit in some places. I'm probably just gonna end up doing that all the way around just to keep it like the same, because it's like more beveled here than it is like over here. But it's following the shape of the outer quarter panel pretty well now. So we just gotta keep an eye on that, because the more we weld it out, the more the shape wants to like warp on us. So just doing little bits at a time. And this back one kept breaking off, so tack that one back on. All right, so we got the whole thing welded up. It's nice and real solid. So now we got to deal with these weird shaped gaps on the front and back. I think we're gonna start with this one. I actually think I'm gonna grind this a little flat so we just have like a straight shot on this side, and then deal with these shapes. Okay, now we have a slightly easier shape to deal with. Now we're just gonna tape it up and call it a day. All right, so now we have the whole area covered. Now we're gonna try and cut out the area that we're missing so we can use the tape as a template and make it out of some sheet metal. Ta-da! That's gonna be a pain in the ass to weld. Okay, now to find a piece of sheet metal. All right, found a piece of sheet metal and just stuck our tape to it. That's the reason I wanted at least one straight edge on the template, because then that saves you some cutting. Regardless, that's still gonna be a pain to cut out. So let's see what we can do. All right, so we got the rough outline cut out. Now we need to go in with the grinder or any other sort of abrasive tool you got to clean up the shape and refine it a bit. While we're doing that, we can check it against the opening and make sure that we got a good fit, and just take little bits off at a time. A little cornered. This is really hard to get into. It's just keeping it from fitting better. So we got our panel pretty much fitting pretty good. So I think we can take the tape off now and start trying to tack it in place and see how it goes. All right, so we got this piece all nice and welded up, and we even managed to get a nice curvature on it by just like basically welding it a little bit at a time and bending it as we went. Pro tip I can give you guys for dealing with really thin sheet metal, because actually there are different thicknesses here. The fender flare is made out of 18 gauge, and I think the frame is actually like 20 gauge or something. It's thinner than the 18 gauge. So I have this piece of pipe that I bent, and this helps a lot when you blow a hole in the thinner sheet metal, because you will blow a hole in it. For whatever reason, welding just doesn't stick to copper. I'm not super sure on the physics behind that. If you know, please explain it in the comments. But if you make a hole, you can just put your copper right behind it and weld straight to that, and it'll fill in the hole, and then you can still pull your pipe straight off of that. So that's a big help, because like I said, it's inevitable. This stuff's like super thin on this side. The 18 gauge is actually really nice to weld on, and probably because it's also a lot newer. But yeah, this side is looking good. We also took care of this side with the same method. Just tack this up, put some tape, cut out the shape. I actually was able to end up using the same piece of fender flare that we had cut off. So this is all like, it could have been continuous, I guess, if I hadn't cut it up in the first place. But I mean, it works out, it's fine. We got it all welded up. So now we can try and clean this up a little bit, at least grind down some of the high spots, because there's just some ugly chicken poops on there. All right, that's gonna be it for this week's episode. I'm super happy with the way this came out. Honestly, it came out a little better than the other side. I hope this gives you guys some ideas, because I've never seen anyone use a fender flare this way. If you guys want to check them out, we'll link their Instagram, Ulterior Motive. And they have like all different kinds of fender flares for a bunch of different applications, Universal, Q50, Mustangs, all kinds of stuff, Chargers. But yeah, I think this was definitely a big help. I mean, there's a lot less fabrication involved, because obviously the fender flare is already fabricated for you. It probably would have helped if they were a little thinner, because trying to mitigate the heat between, you know, a thick panel and a thin panel is a little tricky, but it's fine. I mean, it gets the job done, and it's definitely very sturdy. Again, I'd like to give a shout out to R34 Chris with the Z on Instagram. He's what gave me this idea after seeing the fabrication that he did on his R34. Thanks to him, and thank you guys for watching this week's episode. Stay tuned for the next week, where we get the whole quarter panel on here for good, and finally can get this out of our hair and stop stressing about it. Sorry, this video has been kind of a long time in between, but yeah, this is stressing me out quite a bit. So thank you guys, and see you guys next time.